Well, there you go. You heard the music. Welcome to GFBS and our Berkshire Hathaway bi-weekly podcast. Been a while since he's been in the studio, but the one, the only realty expert, John Brodeen, is back.
Yeah.
How are you, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Good. A little under the weather, I heard, over Thanksgiving.
I was sick over Thanksgiving, but I'm back to 100%.
You're grade A okay now.
Yep, all good.
Yep.
Good.
How's the holidays going for you so far?
It was good. Yeah, me and Carolyn just kind of hung out and watched TV and movies and
All the fun stuff to do on Thanksgiving. What about Christmas? You got big plans?
Probably we're going. So both of our parents live in town, so we'll probably do Christmas Eve at my family's place and Christmas Day over at her parents' place, I'm guessing.
Okay.
So yeah, it should be fun.
Yeah, we're actually starting our Christmases this Saturday.
This Saturday.
I got like 9 of them.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to get all the family together. You know, we got a lot of people down in the Twin Cities and stuff, and with the COVID deal and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Let's talk some realty stuff.
Yes.
Let's talk about pricing.
Yes.
Now, how do you price a home? I mean, what all goes into that?
So that's probably one of the most important parts of our job as a realtor. Missing pricing is going to mess everything up. It can cost the seller a lot of money, if you err on underpricing it, or if you err on overpricing it. Pricing is, just as important as marketing a property. So when we're trying to determine the value of a home, there's a few different approaches we use. Let's say we're looking at a single family, or like a residential property that it's going to be an owner occupied. It's like your average home that a person's going to buy and live in. Right?
Okay.
It's different if you're valuing investment property, but for a home that somebody's going to buy and live in, one of the most important things is finding comps. So those are comparable sales. Comps is short for comparable sales, and we'll refer to the house that we're determining value on as the subject property. So when we're trying to find comps, we want to look at homes that have sold in the past year that are a similar age, same style, similar size, as the subject property. So we're going to be able to use that criteria to find some pretty similar homes that have sold in the past year. And then we're going to adjust for any differences between a comp and the subject property. So let's say this comp has a 3-stall garage, and the home that I'm running the CMA on, finding the value of, has a 2-stall garage. I'll adjust for that difference in garage stalls, right? Or if one of them has an updated kitchen. Typically, if the subject property has an updated kitchen, I want to try to find comps that are more updated, because that's going to reflect a more similar price per square foot. So selecting the right comps is going to be really important when you're valuing a home. And this is all stuff that has to get done twice. So if people think, oh, maybe if I overprice a home and I find somebody who just doesn't know that it's overpriced and they're willing to pay for it, then I'll be able to get a ton more money than what my house is worth. But an appraiser so the bank who's financing the home is going to require an appraisal be done. And an appraiser is going to do the same exact thing, where they're going to find comps that have sold in the past year that are similar age, similar style, similar size, and justify that value. So it's important that we get this right, because it's going to happen again once the house accepts an offer. The other important factors that might affect, so usually this is going to give us a pretty good range of what we think it's going to be worth. And then how we're going to decide where it's going to be at in this range is going to depend on a couple other factors. Like if we think your price range is going to be like 230 to 240, right? And we're trying to figure out where we're going to fit best in this price range, if we're going to be able to be more ambitious and get, closer to the high end of that range, or if we're going to need to be more, conservative and stay in the lower end of the range in order to sell. One of the things that's going to be important is the months of inventory in that price range. Months of inventory is active listings divided by how many homes sell each month. If it's below 6, seller's market, that might mean we can go with a little bit more ambitious, higher price. If it's over 6 months of inventory, that means there's kind of a lot of inventory and not that many buyers buying homes in that price range. So that means that we might need to be a little more conservative, because it's tough to sell a home in this price range right now.
Okay.
So that's going to tell us a lot. And then the other thing we're going to look at is what does our competition look like in that price range? So which homes are most similar to ours in this price range? Where are they priced at? How long have they been sitting? If there's a home just like ours that's priced at 245, but it's been sitting for an entire year, that kind of shows us, hey, 245 isn't our mark. We've got to be below that because, we don't.
Just going to sit there for another year.
Sit for an entire year, and it doesn't mean after a year it's all of a sudden going to sell.
Right.
It's not like the market's going to catch up to it. If anything, they're going to be in a position where they are only going to get really low offers if they get any offers or any activity at all. People don't realize that usually around like 25 to 30% of homes that list never even sell, and the sellers just give up. So we don't want to be a part of that percent.
Right. When you talk about comps, John, when I bought my house, it's a log house, and we had a heck of a time. And this is one thing that I was kind of weary about. Was they said they had to go to like some of the local lakes, Maple Lake, Detroit Lakes, whatever, to try to find some comps. Well, then that got me all freaked out and worried because I thought, okay, I know the cost of lake places.
Yeah.
I mean, they're like double what you would buy, if it was in town or like that. But that really scared me. But it took a little while for them to even find comps when I bought my house. But I mean, it all turned out good.
Yeah, and for you as a buyer, it's a high appraisal is just fine because that means you have more instant equity, and that actually means that maybe you bought it for slightly below what it's truly worth. It could be just some weird circumstances. Like, for example, you might be buying a home for, less than appraised value if there's a lot of months of inventory in that price range right now where things are selling for a little bit lower than what they were selling for 6 months ago, maybe when there was a shortage of inventory. So these things can all kind of factor in. Also, you mentioned your home's kind of a unique home, log home. There's not that many of them. So the more unique a property is, the harder it is to find comps for it.
Right.
So that's when you're dealing with. So the easiest type of houses to nail down a value are going to be like Grand Forks homes, where there's a dozen homes that are similar to that have sold in the past year. When you start to look at small town or out of town properties, it is a little bit harder to find comps for them.
Yep.
But it's still something that can be done, and appraisers have to do it all the time. And you have to work closer with the appraiser. Like if I have a question on a valuation that I'm doing, I call them up all the time and say, hey, what would you do? What would you adjust for this? Would you pick this comp or this comp? We rely on them because eventually they're going to have to appraise it. So I want to think like them because I don't want a low appraisal to blow up in my face and then cost my seller a bunch of money.
Right. So. And that's just another example of how Berkshire Hathaway. I mean, you guys are a big team. When you're dealing with a realty expert like yourself, you're dealing with a lot of people that are working with you.
Yes. Yep. And it's important to rely on other people like that. Appraisers, that's their job. They value properties all day. So the more I can become like an appraiser with my valuation skills, the more of an asset that's going to be to my sellers.
Oh, sure.
So let's go over. You're mentioning appraisals and pricing, and so there are a lot of misconceptions about pricing.
Okay.
And you've probably heard this one. A fast sale means a lower sale price, and if you wait longer, it means you can hold out for more money. Right?
Yeah, it sounds like a myth to me.
It is kind of a myth, and we hear it all the time. And it's something where neighbors might get mad at you if you price your home to sell right away because they want you to reach for those high numbers.
Sure.
Because they feel like that makes their house worth more. Even if your house never sells for that number, they like to see, your house go up for $300,000. And then
right.
They think, oh, now my house is worth, $290,000 since it's almost as nice. But then their house might not ever sell until it gets down to like $260,000. So it has a little bit of an influence from different, but it is one of the most common myths about pricing.
Okay.
So some things for people to know. More buyer interest equals a higher sale price every single time.
Sure.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yep. Buyer interest is at its highest when you're a new listing. That's like even people who don't know very much about real estate can understand why that is.
Yeah.
When you're a new listing, that's when you get the most buyer interest. So when a listing is stale, it shows all the buyers out there that the home isn't a good value because everybody else has passed it over. And this can so the stigma about a property that's been on the market for 200 days is everyone else has said no to this house at this price. They've all said no for a reason. It's that, it's that social proof that we've talked about before. Like the fact that everyone has passed over this home who's had an opportunity to buy it for 200 days at this price, the social proof is that house is not worth what they're asking for it.
Sure.
And the problem is that social proof works against you as you're, even if you've been on the market for 200 days, you've price reduced 5 times, and now you're actually priced where the house is supposed to be priced. Maybe you're even priced a little bit below where the market value is at for your house, but you've got that 300 days on market next to your listing, which is just working against your good price now because everybody's passed it over. People who do show interest might think you're desperate, and you're still, even if it's a really hot market, if you've been on the market for 300 days, you're going to be getting like almost no activity. It's amazing once a home has been on the market for that long, how little activity that it gets. There's so many buyers that are sitting on the sidelines waiting for the right house to come up in their price range.
So basically, if you've got a house that's been on the market for a couple hundred days, you've dropped the price numerous times, people are going to get onto that. I mean, they're going to catch on and they're going to go, well, must be something wrong with this house. It can't be worth what they're asking for, and they keep dropping the price. So I would imagine that is going to start to turn people even off from, inquiring about it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. Like you said, it might make people think that there's something wrong with it, even if there isn't. It's going to make people think it's overpriced, even if it isn't. Some people just kind of like to sit and watch because they're like, oh, they've come down 40 grand. Let's see how much more they've got to come down before they can even sell this thing. So that's probably the biggest thing that's wrong with that misconception. The highest sales, if I'm pulling comps for a house and I find a comp that's like, whoa, that house sold for a lot of money. For what that house is, they got a lot of money for that house. Like it's usually the highest comp out of the 3 that I pull. And I look at it, it's almost always houses with low days on market. And sometimes they might even have sold for maybe even a little bit above asking price, meaning that they had probably multiple offers on it and sold right away when they were fresh. More buyer activity always equals more money. Buyer activity is at its highest early in the listing. Those are just
it's something new.
Of the real estate business. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Even if the market goes up drastically and the market gets super hot, if you listed the house when the market wasn't very hot and the market gets really, really hot, you're going to have a harder time selling for even what it's worth if you have sat on the market for 300 days compared to a new listing. So then the other common misconception is it's safer to price the house above market value versus slightly below market value. Because people say we can always come down.
Sure.
So this is kind of in the same, line of thought.
Start high and we'll go down from there.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And people say, well, we might not even have to sell. If we don't get what we want, we might just stay. Well, you only get one chance at a new listing.
Yep.
So this is your chance that you've decided to take at a new listing. And maybe 2 years from now, you do actually have to sell. And people are all going to be able to look back and see that you tried to sell it this year for this amount.
Okay.
And it's in general, you're never going to get that fresh start again. Mm-hmm. So that's something for people to remember.
So it should be like, if you're going to sell, it should be all or nothing.
It should be
go
all
for
or
it.
Nothing. Yep. It should be all or nothing. If you're just trying to dip your toe in the water and you don't really have to sell, it might hurt you down the road if you decide to pull back and not sell the house at that time. It's not without consequence. Realtors all have access to that information about the history of the listing. So, and here's the other thing to think about. The perfect home is not the perfect listing without the perfect price.
Okay. You want perfect.
Yeah. The perfect home isn't the perfect listing without the perfect price. You might have the perfect home. It might be updated throughout. It might be perfectly clean, perfectly staged. Your curb appeal might be amazing. But if you don't have the perfect price on that home, it's not going to be compelling to get the buyers through the door and to get you the activity that you need to generate in order to get top dollar for the house. Buyers are really, really educated about their price range. Most buyers have access to almost all the information that real estate agents have access to when it comes to active listings.
Okay.
So they're super educated about their price range and their type of home that they want to buy. when they see a house come up that is an attractive home and it's priced right, they know it right away. This house has it all. It's priced right, and it has everything that we want.
So if you buy a new house and say you've got a company coming over maybe for Christmas and they say, wow, love the new house. And you say to them, yep, everything is perfect, except I paid way too much for it. Well, then it's not perfect.
Then they probably wouldn't have bought it in the first place, because to that, what we were just talking about with how educated buyers are, if you're a buyer in the 300 to 320 range and my house is worth 280 and I decided to price it at 310, right? Because I'm being optimistic. I'm thinking maybe somebody will just give me an offer and I can work with them, right? Maybe somebody will look at it and like it. People tell themselves all sorts of things like this, right?
Sure.
When you're looking, you're used to what these houses look like between 300 and 320. So when my 280 comes up priced at 310, you look at it, you go, oh,
yeah,
that doesn't belong in this price range. And even if you are, if you're an active buyer, and let's say for some reason you don't pay much attention, you really just count on your real estate agent. I'm thinking, oh, maybe a dumb buyer will come along who will overpay for this thing. The real estate agent's educated about the price range. The real estate agent knows that house is not worth that price. And so they're going to counsel their buyer that, hey, if you're interested in this one, maybe you should offer here, but don't overpay for this thing. You're never going to get your money back out of it. So the biggest danger to a seller's bottom line is staling on the market. If you sit on the market and you go stale, you are left with very few options. And that's the situation that we want to try to keep you out of. And that's why pricing is so important, because inexperienced agents will, or maybe agents who aren't very confident in the value that they bring, they might promise a seller a high price to make them happy so that the seller chooses them as an agent. And they're not very confident in the service that they provide, so they don't want to tell the seller the truth. They want to just say something that's going to make the seller happy in order to get the listing. And then you're stuck with an overpriced listing that's not selling. Now the seller you've made a false promise to, and now you have to, price reduce, and then you end up in this situation that we just talked about, where a seller has no leverage, no negotiating leverage, and a horrible public perception. There's a lot of inexperienced agents that might overprice a house by accident, and there's maybe less competent agents who will, what we call it, buying the listing, where they just promise a high number to get the seller to like them more than the other agents, and they might know that they can't sell it at that price, and they're just going to try anyway.
So do you ever run into the situation, John, where somebody gets a hold of you, say, I want to sell my house, I want to use you, and come over, take a look, and they say, okay, I want $300,000 for this house, and you're thinking to yourself, no, it's not worth that. It's maybe worth $275, or I'm just throwing numbers out there, and they refuse to go down. How do you deal with that? How do you work with that?
So it's not a situation that I like to be in, but I will occasionally have to walk away from a listing because, I've got other buyers and sellers who want my time, and I don't want to. I need to act in the best interest of this person. If they want to use me, it's not in their best interest to put the house up at a price that it's not going to sell at. I mean, if it's close, it's something where we can be more aggressive, like we had talked about, if the market conditions are right, even if the comps don't back it up. But if it's something where it's way off and all the information is really black and white, and I show it to them and I say, hey, this house are all perfect comps. They're just like your house. This is what they sold for. This is the price per square foot they sold for. All of this information points to this being your eventual sale price. The current market situation is this, meaning we need to be priced here. And if they're way, way off, it's probably not going to be a good match for us to work together. And sometimes they choose a different agent who is willing to take the listing on at that price. And I always leave the door open. I say, hey, if things don't work out, you're not able to sell it with this agent, and your listing expires, I'm always here. We can still work together. And I have had people who have listed with a different agent, failed to sell, and then come back to me, and then we work together. We obviously don't have as favorable of a situation because we have that stigma from that failed listing now to deal with, but we can still deal with it and still get it sold.
So you got to be honest. You got to say it like you see it.
Yes.
In order to do your job and do it effectively.
Yep. And sellers respect the honesty.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
You have to be straight up with them, even if you have to tell them something that they're not going to like. You have to have that conversation.
All right. How does somebody get a hold of John Brodeen, realty expert at Berkshire Hathaway?
My number is 701-213-5428. That's my cell phone. They can call or text me on that number.
All right. Are you going to come back later on this week?
I'll be back, yes.
Awesome.
I love coming back here.
Awesome. All right. We're looking forward to it. There you go. Your Berkshire Hathaway bi-weekly podcast with our realty expert, John Brodeen. And I'll tell you what, he'll be back in the studio on Friday morning. All right. So we're looking forward to that. And until then, have yourself a great day, everybody.